I want to tell you about an idea that once kept me awake. Not the way a noise keeps you awake, or a worry about tomorrow. This was quieter than that. It was the kind of idea that arrives when the house has gone still, when the last car has passed on the road outside, and there's nothing left between you and your own thoughts. It settled in, and it would not leave, and for a while I lay there in the dark turning it over, the way you'd turn a smooth stone in your hand. The idea was this, that according to one reading of modern physics, you will never experience your own death. Not because of anything to do with the soul or heaven or some machine that copies your mind, but because, so the argument goes, there may always be some version of events in which you simply keep going. And so, from the inside, from your own point of view, the story never reaches its final page. The first time I met that idea, it did not feel comforting. It felt enormous and a little cold and strangely lonely, and I lay awake with it. But here is the reason. I'm telling you about it tonight. Of all the nights when your only real job is to rest. Because after I sat with that idea for a long while, after I actually went and looked at where it comes from, and what the physics really says, and just as importantly, what the physics does not say, the whole thing turned over in my hands. The cold feeling went out of it, and what was left underneath was something much gentler. Something I'd even say that helps me sleep now, rather than the opposite. So that's what we're going to do together, slowly, over the next while. We're going to walk toward one of the strangest sounding ideas anyone has ever drawn out of physics. We're going to give it a fair hearing, a genuinely fair one, the kind it rarely gets. And then calmly, without any drama, we're going to walk back out of it. And I think by the time we come out the other side, you'll find, as I did, that the thing waiting for you there is not a fright at all. It's a kind of quiet. You don't need to follow every step. That's the first thing I want you to know. This isn't a lecture, and there won't be a test. If your attention drifts, let it drift. If you fall asleep before we reach the end, then you'll have arrived exactly where I hope to take you, only sooner. The words will keep going. You don't have to keep up with them. And here's the second thing, which matters more to me than the first. I'm not going to sell you the idea. That's not what we do here. There's a whole genre of this, you've probably stumbled across it, that takes a strange notion from physics and cranks it up as loud and frightening as it will go, because fright holds attention, and holds it especially well at night, when we're least offended. I understand the appeal, but it leaves you worse than it found you. And that's the opposite of what I want for you at this hour. So tonight I'm going to do the slower, quieter, more honest thing. I'm going to show you the idea fairly, and then I'm going to show you, just as fairly, exactly where it breaks, including all the parts the loud versions leave out precisely because those parts let the air out of the fear. We're going to end up on solid ground, not on a cliff edge. You have my word on that, and I'd like you to hold me to it, because I think that's what actually lets a mind rest, not being soothed with something false, which some deeper part of you never quite believes, but being walked all the way through something true, until there's nothing left in it to fear. Comfort that comes from honesty holds up in the dark. It doesn't fall apart the moment you look at it closely, and that's the only kind I'm interested in giving you. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they've been holding themselves. Let the weight of your head rest fully into the pillow. There is nowhere you need to be. Nothing is required of you here except to lie still and let the night be long. And I promise you, this is the part I want to make good on. I promise you that wherever this idea seems to be heading, we are going to end somewhere soft. I would not walk you into the dark and leave you there. So you can loosen your grip on the outcome. You already know how the night ends. It ends with you asleep. Let me lay the idea out plainly so we both know what we're looking at. Somewhere in the last few decades, a thought began circulating, first among a handful of physicists and philosophers, and then more recently in the quieter corners of the internet, the kind of place people end up at 2 a.m. The thought has a name. People call it quantum immortality, and the claim, stripped of all its ornament, is that you can never, from your own point of view, actually experience dying. Now, I want to be careful here, because the care is the whole point of tonight. This is a claim that some people make. It is not a finding. It is not something that has been shown to be true, the way we've shown that the Earth goes around the sun, or that light takes a little time to reach us from the stars. It is an argument, a chain of reasoning, that begins with a real and respectable piece of physics, and then takes a series of steps away from it. And whether those steps hold up is exactly what we're going to look at, patiently, together. But first, let me tell you why the idea has any pull at all. Because it does have pull. If it didn't, it would never have kept me awake, and it would never have spread the way it has. The pull comes from a simple observation about your own life. Think back, gently, no need to dwell on anything hard, over the years you've been alive. You have almost certainly come closer to the end than you knew, more than once. Most of us have. A moment on a road that could have gone differently. An illness that turned out to be nothing, but might not have. A near miss you never even registered, because it passed you by an inch and you were looking the other way. Small hinges on which everything quietly turned. And here you are, still. Having come through all of it, so far, whatever all of it has been for you. From where you're lying right now, every one of those close moments resolved in your favour. Every single one. That's not because you were owed it. It's simply that the version of the story you're able to think about tonight is the version in which you're still here to think about it. There is no other version available to you. The ones where things went the other way, you're not in those. Nobody's in those from the inside. The people who believe in quantum immortality take that ordinary observation and stretch it. They say, what if that's not just a quirk of memory? What if it keeps being true all the way down, forever? What if at every moment where things could go either way, there is always some branch of reality where you come through, and that is always the branch you find yourself in, because it's the only one where there's a you left to find anything at all? You can feel, I think, why that lands the way it does at night. It sounds almost like a promise, and it sounds, at the very same time, like a sentence. A promise of never ending, a sentence of never being allowed to. I remember exactly where I was when this fully landed for me. I was sitting in a parked car in the evening, waiting for someone, with the engine off and the windows fogging slightly, and the radio turned down to almost nothing. Nothing was happening. It was one of those completely ordinary in-between moments that make up most of a life and that we almost never remember. And the idea came drifting up out of that nothing, and I sat there in the dark and thought, if this were true, then I have already lived through more than I know, and I will go on living through more than I can imagine, and I will never, ever get to put it down. And I want to tell you, because this is the honest bit, that the feeling didn't stay. It felt overwhelming for about a minute, and then the person I was waiting for opened the door and got in and asked me something completely mundane, and the moment folded itself away and life went on, which is, when you think about it, its own small answer to the whole thing. But we'll get there. It's worth knowing where an idea like this even comes from, because that tells you a great deal about how much weight to put on it. This one didn't arrive from a laboratory. No one discovered it under a microscope, or read it off an instrument, or watched it happen. It grew instead in the space between physics and imagination, a place where the two are easy to mistake for each other. A handful of thinkers, over the last several decades, followed a chain of reasoning out from a real theory into territory that no experiment has ever visited, and some of them found this at the end of it. And then more recently, it spread the way ideas spread now, passed along in the small hours, retold and simplified, and sharpened for effect, each version a little more certain and a little more frightening than the last, until the careful hedges the original thinkers were so careful to include had mostly fallen away. By the time it reaches you at 2 in the morning, it has usually shed every perhaps it started with. It arrives sounding like a fact. It is not one. And I think part of why it travels so well is that it presses on something we already carry. Most of us have somewhere in us a quiet unease about the fact that this all ends. We don't look at it often. We keep it in a drawer we rarely open. And then an idea comes along that seems to speak directly to that drawer. That seems to say, in the language of science no less, that maybe it doesn't end after all. And it gets in under our guard before we've had the chance to ask whether it's actually true. That's not a failing in you. That's just what it is to be a creature that knows it's mortal and would, understandably, rather not. But it does mean we owe the idea a careful look rather than a shiver. A shiver is easy. Care is what lets you sleep. For now, all I want you to hold, loosely, the way you'd hold anything at this hour, is the shape of the claim. Some people say the physics of the very small implies that your experience can never end. It's a serious enough idea that serious people have written about it. And it is also, as we'll see, an idea that most of those same serious people, when pressed, gently set back down. There's a particular texture to ideas like this one, the ones that combine a real, respectable core with a wild, unprovable reach. They're the hardest kind to think about clearly, because the respectable part lends its credibility to the reach, and the reach borrows a seriousness it hasn't earned. You hear quantum mechanics, which is real and tested and wears a white coat, and then in the very same breath you hear, you can never die, and the first thing quietly vouches for the second, and before you know it, the whole package feels like established science, learning to gently separate the two, to hold on to the beautiful, well-tested part and set down the speculative leap, is most of the work of thinking well about any of this. And it's exactly the work we're going to do tonight, unhurried with the light on. To understand why they set it down, we have to understand where it comes from. And where it comes from is genuinely one of the most beautiful and strange corners of everything we know. So let's go there. Slowly. There's no hurry at all. Here is a thing that is true. Not an interpretation, not a story, just true. Tested more thoroughly than almost anything else we know how to test. At the smallest scales of the world, down among the particles that make up everything, including you and your pillow, and the air moving in and out of you as you lie there, matter does not behave the way our everyday intuition expects. It does not behave like tiny pebbles, little hard specks that are always somewhere in particular, doing some one definite thing. It behaves in a way that took the sharpest minds of the last century years to even begin to accept, and that still, if you sit with it, produces a kind of vertigo. Let me try to give it to you gently, because gently is the only honest way. Nobody understands this by being told it quickly. When physicists describe a single particle, say one electron, before they've looked to see where it is, they don't describe it as being in one place. They describe it with something called a wave function. And the wave function is not the particle. It's a piece of mathematics that describes all the different things the particle might be found doing and how likely each of them is. It spreads out. It covers possibilities the way a tide covers a beach. Not sitting in one spot, but present in some smeared and distributed way across many. While the particle is described this way, while it is, as physicists say, in a superposition, it is not that we simply don't know which single thing it's doing. It's stranger than ignorance. As far as anyone has been able to show, the particle genuinely has no single answer yet. The different possibilities are all somehow in play at once, and they can even interfere with one another, the way two sets of ripples crossing a pond can add up in some places and cancel out in others. If that sounds like too much to picture, don't strain for it. You're not supposed to be able to picture it easily. The people who found this out couldn't picture it either, and some of them never made peace with it. There's a famous line from one of the founders of the whole field, I'll paraphrase it so we keep things soft, that anyone who isn't shocked by quantum theory hasn't really understood it yet. The shock is appropriate. The shock is honest. You're allowed to feel it and still lie perfectly still. And you might wonder, reasonably, if the world is really this strange underneath, why don't I ever see any of it? Why does everything around me, my hands, this room, the whole solid furniture of life, behave so sensibly, so predictably, so utterly unspookily? It's a good question, and the answer is a matter of scale, and it's genuinely reassuring. The strangeness lives at the level of single particles in careful isolation. You are not a single particle, you are an almost unthinkable number of them, packed together, jostling, warm, in constant contact with each other and with everything around you. And at that scale, as we'll see a little later, the strangeness doesn't so much vanish as hide itself. Averaged out, washed smooth, buried under sheer numbers, until what's left, up here where you live, is exactly the calm, dependable single world you've always known. The weirdness is real, it's just very, very small and very, very shy. It keeps to the basement. The house you live in is quiet. There is one experiment that shows this more cleanly than any other, and it's worth walking through slowly because it's the ground everything else stands on. It's usually called the double-slit experiment, and in its bones it is almost childishly simple. Imagine a wall with two narrow vertical slits cut into it, side by side. Behind that wall, a screen, and in front of it, some source that fires particles, one at a time so slowly that there's never more than one in flight, toward the slits. Each particle that makes it through lands somewhere on the screen and leaves a small mark, and you simply wait and watch the marks build up one by one over a long time. Now, if particles were tiny pebbles, you'd expect two stripes to slowly form on the screen, one behind each slit, where the pebbles came through. That's what common sense predicts. That's not what happens. What actually forms, mark by mark, is a pattern of many stripes, bands of many marks, separated by bands of almost none. The pattern you'd get if waves had passed through both slits at once and rippled outward and overlapped, adding up in some places, cancelling in others. And remember, we sent the particles through one at a time. There was never a crowd of them to jostle and interfere. Each lonely particle, it seems, went through in a way that took account of both slits at once. Each one, on its own, behaved like a spread-out wave of possibility, right up until the instant it struck the screen and became a single, definite mark. I find that, even now, genuinely moving, not frightening, moving, that the world at its foundation is doing something so much subtler and more delicate than the solid, clattering world of ordinary objects would ever lead you to guess. It helps me to remember that the people who first uncovered all this did not take it in stride. They were not calm about it. These were brilliant, careful, sober scientists, and this discovery unsettled them for years. There are stories of long arguments that ran late into the night and ended in something close to despair, of walking alone afterward in the dark, turning the same question over and over. Can nature really be as strange as these experiments seem to be telling us it is? That was the reaction of the founders, not a shrug. something closer to what you might be feeling now. So if any of this makes the ground feel a little less solid beneath you, you are in the best possible company, and you're reacting exactly as the sharpest minds of the age reacted. The strangeness is not a sign that you've misunderstood, it's a sign that you've understood something real. And notice too how patient they had to be. Nobody worked this out in an evening. It took decades and dozens of people and countless careful experiments, each one narrowing the mystery a little without ever dissolving it. There's a lesson in that pace, I think, and it's a good one to carry into the small hours. The deepest things do not yield to a quick, clever thought at midnight. They yield, if at all, to patience. You don't have to solve anything tonight. Nobody ever has in a single night. You're allowed to just look and wonder and let the looking be enough. But here's the part of the experiment that people fixate on, and I want to give it to you carefully, because a lot of the mystification around all this begins right here. If you add a detector, some way of checking which slit each particle actually goes through, the many-striped pattern vanishes. As soon as which way information is available, the particles start behaving like ordinary pebbles again, and you get the two plain stripes. Look, and it's one thing. Don't look, and it's another. Now it is very tempting, and a great many people have given in to this temptation, to hear that and conclude that human attention, consciousness itself, is reaching into the world and changing it. That the particle knows it's being watched. It's a thrilling thought. It's the seed of 1,000 late-night videos. And it is, as far as the careful physics goes, not the right lesson. The particle does not care whether a conscious mind is watching. What matters is not awareness, but interaction. Whether the particle has been made to interact with something else, some detector, some stray photon, some part of the wider world, in a way that leaves a trace of which path it took. The watching that matters is physical, not mental. A machine left running in an empty room, with no one there to read it, disturbs the pattern just the same. Consciousness, as best anyone can tell, is not required. What's required is that the particle has, in effect, told the rest of the world what it did. Hold on to that distinction, gently, because it's going to matter later, and because it's one of the honest corrections the loud version of this story usually leaves out. It's not your mind that collapses the world, it's contact. It's the particle touching everything else. Physicists have tested this in wonderfully clever ways. They've built versions of the experiment where they can record which slit the particle went through, and then, before looking at the record, erase it. And when the which way information is truly gone from the world, unrecoverable by anyone, the many-striped pattern quietly returns. And when the information is kept, the pattern stays away. What decides the particle's behaviour in every careful version of the test is not whether a human being happens to be paying attention. It's whether the information about the particle's path exists out there in the world, entangled with something, in principle knowable. The universe, it seems, keeps its own books. It doesn't wait for us to read them. That's a subtle point, and an important one. And it's the quiet grave of the popular notion that your gaze is what shapes reality. Your gaze shapes very little. The world was already deciding these things, in the dark, long before anyone was watching, and it will go on, deciding them long after everyone has looked away. I take a strange comfort in that, and maybe you will too. The universe is not hanging on our attention. It does not need to be observed to be real. The stars were burning before there were any eyes to see them, and the particles were settling into their definite outcomes before there was anyone to measure a single one. You're not required to hold the world together with your watching. You can close your eyes. It will all still be here. So, that's the ground. Superposition is real. The double slit is real. and has been repeated countless times, and the many-striped pattern is as solid a fact as any in science. Particles, left undisturbed, behave like spread-out possibilities. Disturbed, brought into contact with the wider world, they settle into single, definite outcomes. None of that is controversial. Physicists of every stripe agree on all of it. If we stopped here, there would be no argument at all, only wonder and a good night's sleep. The argument, all of it, every last bit of the disagreement that leads eventually to that idea about never dying, is not about what happens. It's about what it means, and that it turns out is a very different kind of question. That's where the honest people part ways, and that's where we go next. Let me name the exact place where the mystery lives, because once you can see it clearly, a lot of the fog lifts. We have a piece of mathematics, the wave function, that describes a particle as a spread of possibilities, evolving smoothly, all its options alive at once. And we have our experience, where the particle, when we finally meet it, is always found doing one definite thing, in one definite place, a single mark on the screen, never a blur, never a smear, always one. So the question is, how does the many become the one? How does the spread of possibilities, all of them somehow real enough to interfere with each other, turn into the single outcome you actually see? What happens exactly in the moment of contact? This is called the measurement problem, and I want to be completely straight with you about its status, because the honesty is the gift here. The measurement problem is not solved. It has not been solved for the better part of a century. Some of the most capable people who have ever lived have looked directly at it and come away with different answers. Good, serious, carefully argued, mutually incompatible answers. There is no experiment, as of tonight, that tells us which of them is right. I find something restful in that, and I want to try to pass the restfulness on to you. We are so used to science handing us settled answers that we can forget it also, honestly, marks its own edges. Here is one of those edges. Here is a place where the map simply says, we don't yet know. And the people who know the most are the readiest to admit it. There's one more real feature of the quantum world we should meet before we go on, because it's the thread that ties everything together. And like the rest, it's solid, tested, and not in dispute. It's called entanglement. When two particles interact in the right way, they can become linked, so that from then on, you can't fully describe one without the other. They become, in a sense, a single spread out situation rather than two separate things. And the strange part is that this link doesn't care about distance. You could carry one particle to the far side of the world, and the two would remain correlated. Measure one, and the odds for the other shift instantly to match, as if they were still, in some deep way, one system. Now I want to be careful, because this is another place the loud versions overreach. Entanglement does not let anyone send a message faster than light. It does not let you reach across space and push on something. If you only ever look at one of the particles, you see nothing but ordinary randomness. The link only shows up later when the two sets of results are brought together and compared. So it's not magic, and it's not a phone line between distant places. It's something subtler and, to me, lovelier. A reminder that the tidy picture of the world as a collection of separate little objects, each minding its own business, isn't quite right at the bottom. Down there, things that have met stay related. The world is more woven than it looks. And that weaving is the key to the next idea, because it turns out that this very tendency for a quantum thing to become entangled with whatever it touches is exactly what makes the strangeness disappear at our scale, Which brings us at last to the piece the dramatic versions almost always skip. Now, in the last few decades, physicists have made real progress on one important piece of the puzzle, a piece that the dramatic versions of this story almost always skip, and that changes the whole flavour of it once you know about it. The piece is called decoherence. Let me give it to you slowly, because it's genuinely one of the more beautiful ideas in modern physics, and it's calming rather than the opposite. Remember that a particle, left alone, keeps all its possibilities in play, and those possibilities can interfere with one another. That's what makes the many-striped pattern. But a particle is almost never truly alone. It's surrounded. There are other particles everywhere. Photons of light, molecules of air, the faint warmth of everything nearby. And the moment our particle so much as brushes against that vast surrounding world, something happens to its delicate spread of possibilities. It doesn't get destroyed, it gets shared. The particle's superposition spreads out into its environment. It becomes entangled with more and more particles, its possibilities leaking into the countless things around it, faster than almost anything else in nature. And once that has happened, once the spread of possibilities has been smeared out across billions of other particles, the delicate interference between them becomes, for all practical purposes, impossible to see. The many-striped pattern washes out, not because the possibilities vanished, but because they've been diluted into the whole surrounding world beyond any hope of gathering them back. That's decoherence, and it explains something wonderful. It explains why the big, ordinary world around you looks so solid and single and definite, even though it's built entirely out of these strange, spread-out quantum pieces. A single electron, sheltered and undisturbed, can keep its possibilities alive. But you, a warm object made of unimaginable numbers of particles, in constant contact with the air and the light and the world, you are decohering at every instant, far too thoroughly and far too fast for any spooky spread-outness to survive up at your scale. That's why you never see yourself smeared across two chairs at once. The quantum strangeness is real, but it hides itself, gently and automatically, the moment things get big and warm and connected. Which is to say, always and everywhere you live. Here's a way to feel it. Imagine a single drop of ink held perfectly still in the centre of a glass of water. For a moment it keeps its shape, a distinct, delicate little cloud, its own thing separate from the water around it. That's a bit like a particle's superposition when it's undisturbed, intact, coherent, its possibilities held together. But the drop is in contact with the water, and the water is in constant motion, and so, moment by moment, the ink begins to spread. It threads out into the water in 1,000 directions, thinning and dispersing, until soon it's no longer a drop at all, but a faint tint through the whole glass. Nothing was destroyed. Every particle of ink is still there. But you could never gather it back into a drop. It has been shared out into the water beyond any hope of retrieval. That's decoherence. The delicate quantum thing doesn't get smashed. It gets diluted, spread so thoroughly into the vast surrounding world that its strangeness can no longer be seen, and the world it leaves behind looks perfectly ordinary and solid. And it happens fast. For something as large and warm and connected as you, it happens unimaginably fast over and over, endlessly, which is exactly why your life feels as steady and singular and unspooky as it does. Now here is the honest catch, and I won't hide it from you, because hiding it is exactly what the loud versions do. Decoherence explains why we never see the blur. It explains why the world looks classical and singular and calm, but it does not by itself fully answer the measurement problem. It tells us why the many possibilities stop interfering and become invisible to one another. It doesn't quite tell us why you end up experiencing this one outcome rather than that one. There's still a gap, a small, deep, stubborn gap, right at the heart of it. And it's into that gap, that one remaining space where honest physics still says we're not certain, that all the different interpretations pour. Every serious attempt to say what's really going on lives in that gap. Some of them are calm and modest. One of them, as we'll see, is enormous. And it's the enormous one that the whole idea of quantum immortality is built on top of. So before we go on, let me say the important thing once, clearly, so you can rest on it. Everything we've covered so far is solid ground. Superposition, the double-slit, decoherence, none of that is in dispute. What comes next is different in kind. What comes next is a set of stories that thoughtful people tell about what might be happening in that last small gap. They are not facts, they are the best guesses of honest minds. None yet proven, none yet ruled out. And you're allowed to hold all of them loosely, the way you'd hold anything at this hour. There's a particular kind of peace in that, if you'll let yourself feel it. So much of what keeps us up at night is the demand for an answer. The sense that we have to resolve the thing, settle it, know for certain, before we're allowed to rest. But here is one of the deepest questions there is, worked on by the finest minds for the better part of a century. And the honest state of it is, we don't yet know. And the world goes on turning anyway. The sun still rises, the particles still land on the screen. Your heart still beats, all night, without waiting for anyone to solve the measurement problem first. Not knowing has not stopped a single good thing from happening, which means you too are allowed to not know tonight, and to rest anyway. You do not have to finish the thought to fall asleep. Some thoughts are meant to be left open, gently, like a window in summer, and slept beside. Let your breathing slow a little, if it hasn't already. We've done the hard climbing. From here, the path is mostly downhill, and it leads somewhere gentle. Let's take the first of those stories, the biggest one, next. In the middle of the last century, a young physicist looked at that stubborn little gap, the measurement problem, and had an idea so audacious that his own field mostly ignored it for years. His name was Hugh Everett, and the idea he proposed has come to be called the many worlds interpretation. To feel what he did, you have to remember what the reigning approach was at the time. The standard view, associated with the great physicists working in Copenhagen, treated the moment of measurement as a special event. Before measurement, the wave function spreads and evolves. At measurement, it collapses, snaps down to a single outcome, and all the other possibilities simply cease. That collapse was tacked onto the theory as an extra rule. It worked in the sense that it gave the right predictions, but it never said what collapse actually was, or why measurement in particular should trigger it, or where the line between the quantum world and the ordinary world was supposed to fall. It was a rule that got the answers right, while quietly refusing to explain itself. Everett found that unsatisfying, and I think his dissatisfaction was honest. The mathematics of quantum theory, the smooth spreading of the wave function, is clean and precise. And then right at the crucial moment, you were asked to bolt on a mysterious extra step, the collapse, that appeared nowhere in the mathematics itself. Where did it come from? What if, he asked, we simply didn't add it? What if we took the mathematics completely at its word, all the way, and refused to invent a collapse the equations never mentioned? And when you do that, when you follow the smooth mathematics without ever letting it snap down to a single outcome, here is what you get. You get a picture in which nothing is ever thrown away. every possibility that the wave function contains simply continues, including the different possible outcomes of a measurement, including the different possible versions of the person doing the measuring. So in Everett's picture, when a particle could go one of two ways, it doesn't collapse into one. Reality, in a sense, follows both. It branches, and crucially, you branch with it. There comes to be a version of you that saw the first outcome, and a version of you that saw the second, each of them equally real, each of them convinced they saw the one true result, each of them living on in their own branch of things, no longer able to touch or influence the other. The world on this view is ceaselessly dividing, not with a bang, not anywhere you could point to, but quietly, constantly, at every juncture where the quantum dice might have fallen differently. It is a staggering thought. I don't want to undersell it, because underselling it would be its own kind of dishonesty. If Everett is right, then this is not the only world. It is one leaf on a tree that is forever putting out new leaves, an unimaginable branching structure of parallel histories, most of them containing some version of a person very much like you, each of them experiencing their own single, definite, ordinary-seeming world. And you would have no way of feeling the branching happen. From the inside, each version just sees one outcome, one world, one life. Exactly, in fact, as you do right now. There's a human story tucked inside all this that I find quietly touching, and it's worth a moment. When Everett first proposed his idea as a young man doing his doctoral work, the physics world did not welcome it. The most eminent figures of the day found it hard to take seriously, and the reception was cool enough, dismissive enough, that Everett, still young, essentially walked away from theoretical physics altogether. He went off and had a whole other career, working on very different sorts of problems, and never really returned to the argument he'd started. It was only years later, largely after other physicists rediscovered his work and gave it its memorable name, that the idea came back into the light and began to be argued over seriously, as it still is today. Everett himself didn't live to see how large the conversation would grow. I think about that sometimes. A person sets down an idea, the world isn't ready for it. They move on, and the idea waits, patiently, for a time when people can hear it. There's no moral in it exactly, just a reminder that even the boldest thoughts arrive on their own schedule, and that being early and being wrong can look the same for a long while before they come apart. Now, I could tell that story with a shiver in my voice, and plenty of people do, but I want to tell it the honest way, which is calmer, and I think in the end, more interesting. So let me tell you 3 true things about the many worlds idea. The first true thing is that it is taken genuinely seriously. This is not fringe. Real, distinguished, working physicists, thoughtful people who have spent their lives with these equations, regard many worlds as possibly the most honest reading of the theory, precisely because it adds nothing and removes the awkward, unexplained collapse. Some of the most respected voices in modern physics defend it, carefully and in detail. If you've ever heard someone dismiss it as obvious nonsense, they were being too quick. It deserves the respect it gets. The second true thing is that it is not the only serious option, and it is nowhere close to being established. There are other careful interpretations, and I want you to walk through them with me, slowly, because knowing they exist, really feeling that thoughtful people look at the very same equations and come to very different conclusions, is the single best protection against being frightened by any one of them. So let me lay a few of them beside many worlds, gently, like laying out different maps of the same unfamiliar country. There is a view in which the particles really do have definite positions all along. always somewhere in particular, never truly smeared, quietly guided by the wave function, the way a surfer is carried by a swell. On this picture, nothing ever branches, nothing ever splits, and there's only ever one world, the ordinary one. The strangeness of the double slit isn't the particle being in two places. It's the particle being carried along an unusual path by a wave that does pass through both slits. It's a fully worked out, entirely deterministic picture, and it fits every experiment we've ever done. Some physicists find it the most sensible of all the options. It has been around, in one form or another, for a very long time. There is another view in which collapse, the snapping down to a single outcome, is not a fiction and not an add-on, but a real physical event, something that genuinely happens out in the world, on its own, without any observer, according to a precise rule that physicists are actively trying to work out. On this picture, tiny systems can stay spread out for a long time, but as systems get larger, collapse becomes more and more likely, until, at the scale of anything you could see, it happens essentially instantly. It too gives one single world. And unlike some of the others, it makes its own subtle predictions that could, one day, in principle, be tested, which some people regard as its great virtue. And there is the older, more modest attitude, the practical descendant of the approach that reigned when all this began, which mostly declines to tell you any grand story at all. It treats the wave function as a bookkeeping device, a tool for calculating the odds of what you'll see, and gently sets aside the question of what's really happening behind the numbers as one we may not be equipped to answer, or may not need to. It's less a picture of reality than a disciplined refusal to overreach. Some of the most capable physicists who ever lived held roughly this view, and used it to build, essentially, all of modern technology, without ever once needing to decide whether other worlds exist. These are not lazy alternatives, and they are not fringe. Each one is the considered life's work of serious, careful people. And here is the thing that matters most about the whole collection of them. Every single one fits the experiments we have done exactly as well as many worlds does. Not approximately as well, exactly as well. They all predict the same marks on the same screen. They differ only in the story they tell about what lies behind the marks. And about that, nature has so far said nothing at all. Which brings me to the third true thing, the most important one for tonight. No experiment has ever distinguished between these pictures. Not one. They all predict the same laboratory results, the same marks on the same screen, because they agree completely about what you'll observe and disagree only about what's really going on behind what you observe. As of tonight, choosing between them is not something the evidence forces on you. It is closer to a matter of taste, of judgment, of which kind of story you find least strange. Honest physicists will tell you this themselves. Some lean toward many worlds, some can't abide it. And the reason they can disagree and stay friends and keep working is that nature has not yet handed down a verdict. I find that again restful rather than unsettling. We are standing at a genuine edge of human knowledge, and the view from the edge is honest fog, beautiful, patient, undecided fog. Nobody up here is pretending to see further than they can. I want to dwell on that for just a moment longer, because it's easy to rush past and it's the whole spirit of what we're doing. When several careful, honest people look at the same evidence and reach different conclusions, and no experiment can yet tell them apart, the wise thing is not to pick the most dramatic story and treat it as fact. The wise thing is to hold all of them a little loosely, and to notice that the drama of a story tells you nothing about its truth. Many worlds is a magnificent, vertiginous picture. It's also just one picture. The quieter pictures, The single world guided by a wave, the real physical collapse, the modest refusal to say, are every bit as consistent with everything we've ever measured. If someone tells you with total confidence that the many worlds picture is simply how things are, they've quietly walked past 100 years of honest disagreement to get to their certainty. You don't have to walk past it with them. You can stay here in the good, patient fog, where the truth is still deciding what it wants to be. So keep many worlds in your hand now, lightly, not as the truth, as one serious, unproven, unrefuted story about that last small gap in the theory. Because it's on top of this story, and only this story, that someone built the idea we started with. The idea about you and your death and never quite reaching it. That's the leap we look at next. And it's the leap where, at last, the fright starts to come apart in our hands. Here is the step from a branching universe to a person who cannot die. I'm going to give it to you as strongly as it can be given, its best, most persuasive form. Because I don't believe in knocking down a weak version of anything. If we're going to set the idea down, we should set down the real one at full weight. So let me make the case as its believers would. It begins with a thought experiment. Thought experiments are old and honourable tools. They're not claims about what anyone should do, just imagined situations that help us think. This one has a grim name, so let me handle it lightly and abstractly, and keep it in the realm of pure imagination, where it belongs. And I want to be clear about why we're even entertaining it, because it matters. We're not building toward a conclusion here. We're building towards something we're going to take apart. Sometimes, the only way to really free yourself from a frightening idea is to look at it directly, in full, rather than glancing away. An idea you refuse to examine keeps its power. It sits in the corner of the mind, half seen, and half seen things are always more frightening than they need to be. So we're going to bring this one fully into the light, follow its logic all the way to the end, and see it plainly for what it is. That's not indulging the fear. That's how you dissolve it. You let it finish its sentence, and then you notice calmly that the sentence doesn't hold together. Picture a device rigged to a single quantum event, something genuinely random at the deepest level, like the kind of coin flip a particle makes. Each time the device runs, the quantum event goes one of two ways, 50-50. One way, and nothing happens. The person standing there is fine and notices nothing. The other way, and in the story, that person's life ends, instantly and painlessly. And imagine the device runs again and again and again. Now from the outside, from the point of view of someone watching, the story is ordinary and sad. After enough runs, the odds catch up, and the watcher sees the person's life end. 50-50, over and over, only ever goes one way in the end. That's the outside view, and there's nothing strange about it. But the argument asks you to take the inside view, in a world that branches. Each time the device runs, if Everett is right, reality splits. In one branch, the event went the harmless way, and there's a version of the person still standing there, unharmed, aware, thinking their next thoughts. In the other branch, things ended. And here's the move, the whole hinge of the idea. The version whose story ended has no more experiences. There is no inside to that branch anymore, nobody there to feel anything, or notice anything, or reach a conclusion. But the version who came through, that version keeps having experiences, keeps thinking, keeps noticing that remarkably they're still here. And so the argument says, run the device 1,000 times. And yes, in the overwhelming majority of branches, the person's story has ended. But every one of those branches is silent from the inside. The only branches that contain any experience at all, any point of view, anyone home to have one, are the vanishingly rare branches where the coin came up harmless every single time. And so the only experience available to be had, the only inside view that exists, belongs to the improbable survivor. From within, you would always find yourself to be the one who made it. You would seem to yourself to be uncannily, impossibly lucky. Because luck is the only thing an inside view can ever report. And then the believer widens it out beyond the imaginary device to your whole life. Every genuine brush with the end, they say, is a little version of that coin. Everyone splits reality. And you, the you having this thought, are by simple necessity walking down the one long corridor of branches where things kept going. Not because you're protected, just because that corridor is the only one with anyone in it to walk. Extend it far enough, the argument says, and there is always some thread of experience that continues, some improbable survivor riding an ever thinner streak of luck, who never arrives at the end because the end from the inside has no arrival, and that thread, they say, is you, forever. And the argument has one more move to make, the one that gives it its real teeth. It says, look, you already trust this exact reasoning in a smaller form. You already accept that you can only ever find yourself in a situation where finding yourself is possible. You will never wake up dead and be surprised about it. You will never have the experience of not existing. Every experience you will ever have is necessarily an experience of being alive, because there's no one home for any other kind. That much is just plainly, undeniably true. And all quantum immortality does, the believer says, is take that undeniable little truth and let the branching universe supply an endless stream of situations in which finding yourself remains possible. If you grant the small version, and how can you not, then the large version is only the small version run forever. That's the case at full strength. That's why it grips. I want to pause here because I've just made the case as well as I can make it, and I can feel its weight, and I imagine you can too. Lying in the dark, it has a terrible, smooth logic to it. It seems to follow. Each step looks like it connects to the last. And this is exactly the moment where most tellings of this story stop. Right here, at the peak of the shiver, they let you lie there with the smooth, cold logic and the feeling that you've glimpsed something enormous and inescapable, and they roll the credits, and they leave you alone with it in the dark. I'm not going to do that to you, because the honest truth, the truth that the same physicists who take many worlds seriously will tell you plainly, is that this argument, for all its smooth surface, does not hold. It has real cracks in it, deep ones, and once you see them, you can't unsee them, and the whole cold structure loses its grip. Even the man who first sharpened this thought experiment did not believe it meant you'd actually live forever. He offered it, in part, as a puzzle to be seen through, not a fate to be feared. So let's turn on a soft light and look at the cracks together. This is the part they skip. This is the part that lets you finally set the whole thing down. Take a slow breath. Here's where it comes apart. So we've held the frightening idea up to the light at full strength and let ourselves feel its pull. Now let's turn it slowly and look at the seams. And I want you to notice, as we do, that none of what follows requires any special genius or any hidden knowledge. Each crack is something you could have found yourself, with a little patience, which is exactly why the honest physicists find them so quickly, and exactly why the idea doesn't keep them up at night. There are 3 main cracks, and then a 4th that opens a door. We'll take them one at a time gently, and by the end there won't be much left of the fear to carry. The first crack is the deepest. and it's about a word we've been letting slide. How many? The whole frightening argument leans on counting. It pictures the branches as if they were so many identical rooms, and asks which rooms have someone in them, and concludes that as long as one lit room remains, that's where you'll find yourself. But that picture, branches as equal countable rooms, is not actually how the theory works. And here is where the loud version quietly misleads you. In quantum theory, the different possible outcomes do not come out equal. They come with weights. The mathematics assigns to each outcome a kind of thickness, a measure of how much of reality it represents. And those weights are precisely what the theory uses to make its predictions. The predictions that have been confirmed to staggering accuracy in the laboratory for 100 years. When something is very unlikely, that's not a statement about how many branches it lives in. It's a statement that its branch is thin, that it carries almost none of reality's weight. And the survivor's branch, the one the argument hangs everything on, is the thinnest of the thin, vanishingly thin, so thin that treating it as though it were just as real, just as much where you are as the thick and ordinary branches, that is exactly the mistake the mathematics warns against. You cannot say, well, some branch survives, so that's automatically where my experience goes, any more than you could say, well, it's not literally impossible to win a lottery every week for a lifetime, so that must be what happens to me. The theory doesn't count branches and hand you the last lit one. It weighs them, and by any honest weighing, the immortal thread carries essentially none of the reality there is to go around. The argument smuggles in a way of counting that the physics doesn't actually license. Pull that out, and the tower leans. Here's a way to feel the difference between counting and weighing. Imagine someone tells you it's not impossible to flip a fair coin and have it come up the same way 1,000 times in a row. That outcome exists, so that's the one that'll happen to you. You'd know immediately that something had gone wrong with the reasoning. Yes, the all the same outcome exists. It's a real possibility. You can't call it impossible, but it's so staggeringly unlikely that betting your understanding of the world on it would be a kind of madness. Its existing and its mattering are two completely different things. The immortality argument runs exactly this trick, just dressed in the language of branches. It notices that a surviving thread exists, true, and then quietly slides from exists to that's where you'll be, skipping right over the vanishing, near zero weight that the physics attaches to it. Once you see that slide, you can't unsee it. The whole frightening structure was standing on the difference between a thing being possible and a thing being probable, a difference we navigate effortlessly every ordinary day of our lives. The second crack is quieter, and to me, even more decisive. It's this: real endings are almost never a clean single, all or nothing coin flip, and the whole argument depends on pretending they are. The imaginary device was designed to be instant and total, fine or gone, nothing in between. But that's not how bodies work, and it's not how the actual close of a life tends to go. In the real world, the moments the argument points to, the accidents, the illnesses, the slow declines, are not sharp switches. They are long, graded, tangled processes with 1,000 small steps and every shade in between. And once you allow the in-between, once you're honest that the branches aren't just perfectly fine and instantly gone, but include every gradation of harmed, weakened, diminished, barely there, the promise curdles completely. Because if you insist that some thread of your experience always continues, then you're not being promised endless, vigorous life. You're being promised endless continuation through whatever states still technically contain a flicker of experience. The branches where you survive are overwhelmingly not the ones where you leap up unharmed. They're the ones where a little more is lost each time, and a little more, and a little more, with the thread growing thinner and dimmer, but never, on this logic allowed to release. One careful philosopher who took this idea more seriously than almost anyone followed exactly that thread to its end. And what he found there was not a comfort and not a fantasy of immortality. What he found was bleak. He realized that if you truly believed this argument, it would not promise you glory. It would promise you the opposite, not a clean ending and not eternal youth, but an endless drift into ever more diminished states, held open forever by the very logic that refuses to let the thread go dark. He found it disturbing, and he was right to. But notice what that means. It means that even taking the idea completely seriously, following it all the way without flinching, does not deliver the shiny, frightening thing the internet version sells. It delivers something so plainly unappealing and so clearly at odds with everything we understand about how bodies and minds actually work, that it becomes another reason to doubt you've reasoned correctly. When an argument's honest conclusion is that absurd, the wise response is not dread. It's suspicion of the argument. And notice how completely this dismantles the frightening version. The scary idea sold you an image. You, whole and well, waking up again and again, unkillable, vigorous, going on forever. But that image requires the clean, instant, all-or-nothing coin flip, and that coin flip doesn't exist outside the thought experiment. In the real, graded world, the branches where a flicker of experience continues are overwhelmingly not the ones where you're fine. They're the ones where something has gone wrong and not quite finished going wrong. So the argument, taken honestly, cannot deliver the bright immortality it advertised. It can only deliver at best a dim and diminishing persistence that no one would wish for, and that looks nothing like the promise. The frightening version and the honest version are two different things, and the honest version is not frightening in the way you were sold. It's just sad and strange and almost certainly wrong for all the other reasons we're walking through. The bright terror was never the real conclusion. It was the advertisement. The third crack is the plainest of all, and it's the one working physicists tend to reach for first. This whole idea makes no prediction that anyone else can ever check. It is, in the language scientists use, unfalsifiable. Think about it. The claim is about what you, and only you from the inside, will supposedly always experience. But no one else can ever get in there to see it. From the outside, from where everyone who isn't you stands, nothing unusual is ever observed at all. People do reach the ends of their lives. That's what everyone else always sees. The supposed immortality is arranged by its own design, so that it can never show up in anyone's data, never be tested, never be confirmed or refuted by anything but the private, unshareable, unrepeatable experience of a single person who could never report back. And a claim built so that no possible observation could ever bear on it has stepped outside of science entirely. It's not a finding. It's a story that has carefully placed itself where no finding can reach it. That doesn't make it false, but it means it can't lean on the authority of physics, because physics is exactly the practice of testing things against what everyone can see, and this by construction refuses to be tested. And so, and this is the fact I most want you to carry out of the dark with you, the physicists who love many worlds the most are overwhelmingly not walking around believing they're immortal. The very people who find Everett's picture the most honest reading of the equations will, in almost the same breath, gently set the immortality conclusion aside. They'll point to the weights, they'll point to the graded, unclean reality of how things actually end. They'll point out that it predicts nothing anyone can check. They took the same walk we've just taken, some of them decades ago, and they came back out the other side and got on with their work and their lives. The scary version isn't the expert version. The scary version is what you get when you take a serious idea and stop reading 3 steps too early. And there's a fourth crack, quieter than the others, that I've saved for last because it opens a door we're going to walk through in a moment. The whole frightening argument rests on a word it never examines, the word you. It assumes that the survivor in that thin branch is you, the same you, continuous with the one lying here now, so that their going on counts as your going on. But is that right? Is a version of you, downstream of countless splits, shaped by a wildly improbable history you never lived, really you, in the sense that should make you feel trapped or reassured? Or is that just a word we're stretching past its breaking point? The argument helps itself to a rock-solid, unbroken you that persists cleanly through every branching. And as we're about to see, that seamless, unbroken self is the one assumption in this whole story that doesn't survive a close look even in ordinary life. Right here, tonight, with no branching required at all, the frightening idea leans its entire weight on the sturdiest seeming thing in the room. And that thing turns out to be the softest. So let me gather it up for you, softly, so you can put it down. The physics underneath, superposition, the double-slit, decoherence, all real, all solid, all quietly beautiful. Many worlds, a serious, respectable, entirely unproven story about the last gap in the theory, held lightly by the honest, one option among several. And the leap from there to your own endless survival, a leap that miscounts what the theory actually weighs, that curdles into something bleak and absurd the moment you're honest about how endings really go. And that has arranged itself so cleverly that it can never be tested by anyone at all. It is not a fact about you. It never was. You can let it go. And feel, if you can, what's left in the space where the fright used to be. It's lighter than you'd expect. It turns out you were never actually sentenced to anything. The corridor with no exit was a trick of counting in the dark. You are, as far as the honest science can say, exactly as free to rest and to end and to be released in the fullness of time as every living thing that has ever quietly closed its eyes. But I promised you there was something genuinely strange still waiting, something true this time and gentler than the fear. And there is. It's just not about many worlds at all. It's much closer to home. It's about the far quieter mystery of what makes you the same person tonight that you were this morning. And that one, I think, is worth lying still for. Let's go there now, softly, as the night gets deeper. Set the many worlds aside now. Let them drift off into the fog they came from. We don't need them for what's left, because there is a strangeness that requires no exotic interpretation, no unproven story, no leap of any kind. It's sitting right here, in the perfectly ordinary fact of you lying in a bed at the end of a day, and once you notice it, it has some of the same vertigo as all that quantum branching. But it's real, and it's calm, and oddly, it points the opposite way, away from fear, not toward it. Here's the strangeness. Consider the you of this morning, the one who woke up wherever you woke up and moved through the hours and did the things the day asked of you and eventually arrived here at the edge of sleep. You call that person me. You call this person me. You assume without a flicker of doubt that they're the same person, that a single continuous you carried straight through from the morning to now. Unbroken, obvious, one. But look a little closer, gently, and the obviousness starts to soften. Your body is not a fixed thing that you have. It's a process, a flame, something matter is constantly passing through. The atoms that make you now are not, in the main, the same atoms that made you years ago. Over time, the material cycles out and is replaced, ordinary stuff moving through the pattern that is you the way water moves through the standing shape of a wave in a river. The wave holds its form. The water is never the same water twice. You are, in that sense, far more like the shape of the wave than like the water, a pattern that persists while its substance streams endlessly through it. The stuff of this morning's body and the stuff of tonight's are already in part different stuff, and yet the pattern held, and you never felt a seam. And it's not only the body. Think about your memories, the threads you'd reach for if someone asked you to prove you were the same person as this morning, or as 10 years ago. We tend to imagine memory as a kind of recording, tucked away and replayed faithfully when we need it. But that's not really how it works. Each time you bring a memory up, you don't so much play it back as build it again, in the present, out of the pieces you have. And it comes back subtly changed by the building, coloured by who you are now, and then it's put back down, slightly altered. Your past, as you hold it, is less a library of fixed recordings than a story you're gently, continuously retelling. The you of this morning is partly a tale that tonight's you is in the middle of composing. You can catch this happening if you're gentle about it. Take some memory from long ago, a room you spent time in as a child, a person's face, an afternoon. Notice how it comes to you not as a crisp recording, but as something softer and more assembled, a few vivid fragments, and the rest filled in quietly by the mind without asking. Notice how it may have shifted over the years, how details have wandered, how the feeling of it has changed as you've changed. That's not a flaw in you. That's simply what a memory is, a living thing, remade each time it's visited, never quite the same twice. And it means the person you take yourself to be, the one built out of all these remembered threads, is being softly rewoven all the time, thread by thread, night after night, including tonight, including now. And here's something worth sitting with. Not one of these changes has ever felt like a break. You did not wake this morning and feel yourself to be a stranger to last night's sleeper. You have flowed through every one of these small renewals, new material, rewoven memories, shifting moods and views, and it has felt from the inside like one smooth, continuous life. The changing never announces itself. It happens beneath the level where you'd notice, so gently and so constantly, that the very idea of a single unchanging you feels obvious, even though almost nothing about you actually stays fixed. The continuity you feel is real as a feeling. It's just not what you assumed it was made of. So what is it exactly that makes them one person? Not the same matter. The matter has partly turned over. Not perfectly fixed memories. The memories are being quietly rewritten as we speak. Not some unchanging core you could point to, because everything you might point to is, on inspection, in motion. What's left to be the thread? Philosophers have a gentle way of sharpening this, and I'll offer it not to trouble you, but because I think, at this hour, it's oddly soothing to see how open the question really is. Imagine, purely as a thought, the way we imagine the ink in the water, that some far future machine could scan you down to the last detail and build a perfect copy, atom for atom, somewhere else. Same body, same memories, same way of laughing, same sense of being one continuous self stretching back through the years. The copy would wake and feel completely like you, and would be utterly certain it was you, with just as much right to the feeling as you have right now. And here's the quiet question the philosophers ask. Would it be you? Most people feel a strong pull to say no, that the copy is someone else, however identical, but then turn it around. In what way is that copy any less continuous with this morning you than tonight you is? Tonight you's also built from partly new material, also carrying rewoven memories, also just a pattern that feels seamlessly like the same person. If sameness of pattern isn't enough to make the copy you, then what exactly makes tonight you the same person as this morning you, given that tonight you is also, in the end, just a very good continuation of a pattern? I'm not going to pretend to settle that for you, because no one has settled it, and it would be dishonest to sound as though I had. But notice what it does to the question. It shows that the same person is not the simple, solid, obvious thing we walk around assuming it to be. It's a soft idea, a useful, loving, practical idea, but soft at its centre, more a matter of continuity and care than of some hard, unchanging fact. And once you feel how soft it is, the whole frightening argument, which needed a rock-hard you to trap forever, has nothing left to grip. You can't be sentenced to eternity if the you in the sentence was never that fixed to begin with. And here, right here, is the beautiful part, the part I actually find restful, the part that turned this whole subject over in my hands, that night in the parked car. Because notice, none of that uncertainty about the thread has ever, for one moment, disturbed your sleep. You have lived your entire life as a pattern streaming with fresh material, a story ceaselessly retelling itself, a wave holding its shape, while everything that composes it flows through. And it has never once felt like a problem. It has felt like being you. It has felt exactly, seamlessly, effortlessly fine. Which tells you something. It tells you that the seamless, continuous you that the immortality argument was so worried about preserving forever was never the solid, fixed thing the fear imagined in the first place. There was never a changeless core in there, locked in, that could be trapped in some endless corridor. There was only ever this, a pattern, gracefully renewing itself, a little different every hour, held together not by sameness of substance, but by something softer and more like continuity. The way a piece of music is one piece, even though no two moments of it are the same, even though it's nothing but change from beginning to end, even though the very thing that makes it music is that it moves and doesn't stay. And think about what that means for the fear we started with. We were frightened at the beginning of something that could never end, but a piece of music that could never end would not be more beautiful for it. It would stop being music at all. The pauses, the closings, the way a phrase resolves and gives way to the next. The fact that it moves towards something and eventually comes to rest. That's not a flaw in the music that we'd fix if only we could. It is the music, a thing that only flows because it doesn't last. And maybe, I offer this gently, as something to rest against. Not as a claim about anything beyond what we can see. Maybe a life is a little like that too, not diminished by moving and changing, and eventually coming to rest, but made into what it is by exactly those things. The very impermanence that the frightening idea treated as a horror to be escaped might be closer to the source of everything that makes a life feel like a life at all. There's an old thought, you find it in careful modern philosophy and in traditions far older than any physics, that when you look hard for the fixed self at the centre of you, the thing that must be preserved at all costs, you don't find it. Not because you're broken or because something's wrong, but because it was never that kind of thing. There's no little unchanging passenger being carried through your life. There's just the life flowing, and the flowing is the self. And people who have really taken that in tend to report that it's not a loss at all. It's a lightening. If there's no fixed thing that has to be clung to and defended and dragged intact into an endless future, then there's nothing that has to be clung to and defended and dragged intact into an endless future. The grip can open. What a relief, actually. What a quiet, ordinary relief. And here is the gentlest proof of all, and it's the one you're about to give yourself tonight, as you do every night. Because every night you already let the continuous self go, and it has never once harmed you. When you fall asleep, that steady stream of you, the running narration, the sense of being a single someone moving through time, quietly dissolves. For hours there is no you keeping watch, no thread of ongoing self, no one minding the store. And then in the morning, it gathers itself back together and picks up the story and calls itself the same person and never thinks twice about the gap. You do this every single day of your life. You release the whole apparatus of being a continuous self, willingly, gratefully, and you sink into the dark, and you trust, without even framing it as trust, that something like you will reassemble on the other side. And it always has. Sleep is the nightly evidence that letting the self loosen is not a catastrophe. It's a rest. It's the most natural and welcome thing in the world. You were never as afraid of letting go as the daytime mind insisted. You've been doing it, softly, every night, for as long as you've been alive. So the very thing the frightening idea was so desperate to preserve forever, the unbroken, continuous self, is a thing you happily set down at the end of every single day and have never missed for one moment while it was gone, which tells you, I think, how much you actually need it to be permanent. Not much at all, not nearly as much as the fear supposed. Turn it back for a moment to where we started. The immortality idea frightened us because it imagined a self that could never be set down, a you fixed and singular, condemned to continue. But the honest look at the physics dissolved the mechanism that was supposed to trap you, and now the honest look at the self dissolves the very thing that was supposed to be trapped. There was no changeless you to imprison in an endless corridor. There was only this streaming, renewing, gently retelling pattern, which has never needed to be permanent to be precious, and which was never as solid or as separate as the fear required. That, I think, is the strangeness worth keeping. Not a spooky claim about parallel lives you can't see, just a plain, true, gentle fact that you're more like a melody than a monument. Something that is beautiful because it moves, something whose whole nature is to flow into this moment, and then softly out of it, and into the next. And flowing into the next moment is, after all, exactly what you're doing right now. Slowing, softening, letting one moment loosen its hold and pass you gently to the one behind it, which is the most natural thing in the world for a pattern like you. It's what you've been doing, seamlessly, all your life. It's what you were built to do. Let's let it happen now, Tia. So let's come back, out of the physics, out of the philosophy, out of all of it, to the simple room you're lying in and the simple fact of your own breathing. We went a long way tonight. We walked all the way out to one of the strangest ideas anyone has ever pulled from the science of the very small. We gave it a real hearing, and then carefully together, we saw why the people who understand it best don't lose sleep over it, and neither now do you have to. Notice what we did not find out there at the edge. We did not find a corridor with no exit. We did not find a self, fixed and frightened, sentenced to go on forever. We found something much kinder and much truer. We found that the world is delicate and strange at its foundation, and honest about the limits of what it knows. And we found that you, the you lying here, are not a hard, permanent thing that has to be defended against ending, but a soft and streaming pattern that has been quietly renewing itself without complaint every hour of your life. And a pattern like that does not need infinite branches. It does not need 1,000 parallel lives. It has something better, something the frightening version never offered. It has this one, this single, actual, ordinary night, this breath going in, this breath going out, the particular weight of your own body settling into the bed, the particular quiet of this hour. You don't need to be everywhere at once. You are wonderfully, completely here. There's a kind of gratitude that I think is the only honest response to all of this. And I'll say it softly, once, and then let it be. It is so deeply improbable that any of us should be here to lie awake and wonder about any of it at all. Out of all the ways things could have gone, all the vanishing chances, the sheer unlikeliness of a warm, thinking pattern like you existing to consider a starlit ceiling. It's staggering when you let yourself feel it. And you don't have to earn it, or hold on to it, or make it last forever. You only have to have it, and you do have it, right now. You've made it this far. That was never guaranteed, and here you are anyway. Think of the distance we travelled to arrive back at something so simple. We went out to the very edge of what the science can say, through the spread out particles and the many striped light and the ink dissolving into water and the branching worlds and the thin bright thread of the supposed survivor, all the way out to an idea that arrives in the dark sounding like a life sentence, and then we walked step by careful step back in. And what we carried home was not a fright at all. It was this, a single night, a single breath, a pattern softly renewing that never needed to be permanent to be worth everything. The long way out and the long way back, and at the end of it, only your own quiet room, and you in it, safe and tired and ready to let go. That is the honest ending. Not the shiver they leave you with, this, a person lying in the dark, no longer afraid of a corridor that was never there, free to do the most ordinary and most necessary thing a living creature does, to rest and to trust the night, and to let tomorrow's version of you gather itself together in the morning the way it always has. So there's nothing left to solve tonight, nothing to decide. The strange idea has been set gently down where it belongs, and it won't follow you into sleep. You can let the last of the thinking go now. You've done enough of it, more than enough. Let your attention come down out of your head, where all these words have been living, and let it sink slowly through you. Let it leave the thinking behind, the way you'd set down something you'd been carrying for a long time without realizing how heavy it had become. Down through your face first. Let the small muscles around your eyes soften. Let your jaw come loose, your tongue rest easy, your brow smooth itself out. There's nothing here that needs your effort. Down through your shoulders, letting them fall away from your ears, letting them be as heavy as they truly are. Down through your chest, rising and falling on its own. No effort from you, nothing to manage. Your breath has been taking care of itself your whole life, and it will keep on, all through the night, without a single instruction from you. Down through your arms, all the way to your fingertips, heavy and warm against the bed. Down through your belly, softening. Down through your hips, letting them sink. Down through your legs, long and heavy now, all the holding gone out of them. All the way down to your feet and then past them, until whatever's left of your attention just pools somewhere low and warm and still. And there's nothing holding you up anymore, because nothing needs to. The bed is holding you. The night is holding you. You can stop. You are a pattern, softly renewing. You have been all along, and the most natural thing a pattern like you can do at the end of a long day is to loosen and thin, and let the next quiet moment carry it gently onward. You don't have to listen to the words anymore. They'll keep going for a little while, low and steady, the way the sound of rain keeps going, whether or not you follow it. You can let them become that, just a sound in the room, a warmth at the edge of the dark. There is nothing to reach for, nothing to keep hold of. The whole night stretches out ahead of you, long and soft and entirely yours, and there is more than enough of it. You are not late for anything. You are not behind. You are exactly where a person is supposed to be at this hour, which is here and still and slowly letting go. If a thought drifts by about the day that's gone, or the one that's coming, or anything at all, you don't have to chase it, and you don't have to push it away. Just let it pass, the way a cloud passes over the moon, without taking anything with it. There will be time enough for thinking tomorrow. Tonight there is only this soft, dark, unhurried settling. Only the slow tide going out. Feel how little is being asked of you now. Only to breathe, which you are already doing. Only to rest, which your whole body has been leaning toward for hours. You don't have to make sleep happen. You only have to stop holding yourself away from it. And that too is a kind of loosening, a kind of quiet trust that the next moment will hold you, the way every moment so far has held you, without your having to do a single thing. The strange ideas are gone. The counting in the dark is over. There was never any corridor. There was only ever this, one breath, and then the next, and the soft space between them, widening now. And in the morning, without any effort at all, you will gather yourself back together, the way you always do. The story will pick itself up where it left off. You don't have to arrange it. You don't have to be awake for it. It happens on its own, gently in the dark, the way it has every morning of your life. So you can let this one go completely. There is nothing to keep watch over, nothing to hold together. You are allowed now to simply not be here for a while. You are here. You are breathing. The night is long enough. You've made it this far. And you can rest now. All the way. Let it take you. Rest. That's all. Just rest.